Texans want a ban on Chinese land ownership. It's July 29th, 2024, and these are your headlines. A select House committee tasked with studying a potential ban on land ownership by hostile foreign entities is facing criticism now for failing to allow public testimony. The hearing, which was largely dominated by special interest groups and paid lobbyists last week, has sparked concerns about the inclusivity and transparency of the legislative process. Well, in response, Texans for Fiscal Responsibility issued a formal letter today to Representative Cole Hefner, who chairs the committee, expressing their concerns over the limited scope of testimonies heard during the recent hearing. Last week, the committee convened to discuss the threats posed by hostile foreign organizations to Texas's economy, security, and values. However, TFR highlighted that the hearing predominantly featured invited testimony from a select few, including paid lobbyists and organizations like the Texas Farm Bureau, leaving out the voices of ordinary Texas citizens. Texas Scorecard reported last week that the Texas Farm Bureau expressed their opposition to a ban on selling land to entities closely affiliated with the Communist Party of China, calling it a threat to private property rights. Well, TFR underscored the potential risks of foreign entities, particularly those linked to oppressive regimes such as the Chinese Communist Party, owning or controlling Texas' natural resources, land, housing, and other real property. The organization argues that such ownership fundamentally threatens the welfare of millions of Texas families and small business owners. In their letter, TFR calls for additional hearings where ordinary Texans and taxpayers can publicly address the committee and voice their concerns. Meanwhile, the House Committee on Agriculture and Livestock is set to hear testimony examining foreign ownership of farmland, timberland, pasture land, and agricultural processing facilities. That hearing is scheduled for August 13th and will only hear invited testimony. A Christian man cited for violating a city noise ordinance while preaching at the Fort Worth Stockyards has been acquitted. Dante Newton was found not guilty following a jury trial last week in a Fort Worth municipal court. Newton's defenders called the verdict a significant constitutional victory. He was issued a citation last September by Fort Worth police for disturbing the peace and unnecessary noise while he was preaching and giving testimony on a sidewalk at the Fort Worth Stockyards. The 19-year-old was completing his final day of a week-long evangelical training with the organization Christ for All Nations. Newton maintained that his microphone was within city ordinance guidelines, limiting sound to 70 decibels. Citizens Defending Freedom, a national nonprofit that organizes locally to support liberty, represented Newton in court. A public sidewalk is considered a traditional public forum with the highest level of First Amendment protections, they argued. CDF Executive Director Rosalie Marie Escobedo said following the verdict that this case serves as a testament to the enduring importance of constitutional rights and the power of community support in upholding these fundamental freedoms.
Tired of cable news lying to you? It's time the establishment media went the way of the dinosaurs and for free digital journalism to rise. At Texas Scorecard, we bring you real news for real Texans with no paywalls ever. Go to TexasScorecard.com today.
Representative Troy Nehls has sent a third letter to Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas regarding violent criminals being released from prisons, embedding themselves into migrant caravans, and coming into the United States. The letter was co-signed by Representatives Byron Donalds and Randy Weber and Pete Stober, presses Mayorkas to stop Venezuelans from entering the U.S., deport those released into the country who are awaiting immigration proceedings, and implored him to initiate a complete and total moratorium on all Venezuelan immigration until Venezuela agrees to cooperate with deportation requests. In September of 2022, going back nearly 2 years, Nehls, along with 13 of his colleagues, sent a letter to Mayorkas regarding Border Patrol reports alleging that the Venezuelan regime under Maduro's was releasing violent criminals from prison early, including inmates convicted of murder, rape, and extortion, without getting a response. He then sent a second letter in February of 2024, explaining that Venezuelan gangs were in U.S. cities and had committed multiple murders and sexual assaults. Still, having received no response, Nehls wrote again to Secretary Mayorkas last week, stating that despite awareness of the threat posed by the Venezuelan aliens, DHS released 2 Venezuelan nationals into the country in March and May of this year, even though beds were available in detention centers, a practice which Nehls and Senator Ted Cruz have since introduced legislation to prevent. Those 2 Venezuelan nationals reportedly went on to sexually assault, torture, and murder a 12-year-old girl in Houston, Jocelyn Nungare. Troy Nehls said if this administration truly cared about the safety of the American people, they would take action to prevent violent criminals from entering our country and deport those who have been released into our homeland, especially bad hombres from Venezuela. For more of today's stories, go to TexasScorecard.com.